I'm Suka. I was born and raised in Hong Kong and moved to Melbourne 7 years ago, and this is the first time in 3 years going back. One of the biggest fears I had going back was having no one to hang out with. I was convinced I'd be spending the next 18 days hanging out with this one friend who so happens to be my music partner, stream part-time city life, or my dad. I essentially dropped off the face of the earth to all my Hong Kong friends' knowledge when I left. And I'm not kidding when I say this, I had a friend even tell me that everyone seriously thought you or something. We never heard from you. And before you say anything, yep, this is the one friend I have left. And before you get impressed, he lives in Melbourne too. To my surprise though, my arrival into Hong Kong was anything but quiet. My phone was blowing up with people wanting to see me. Old friends I haven't talked to in 7 years, aunties and uncles that watched me grow up, and even friends that I've seen just a few months ago in Melbourne. I hadn't felt this kind of warmth in a long time, and it was shocking to me that the community I left behind in Hong Kong still had so much love towards me. In a way, it made me feel like a shit person, because in all honesty, I am not the best when it comes to responding to messages, and because of my actions, I wasn't expecting much coming back. For the ones that were in contact with my family, they would have messages passed on to me throughout the years, yet I made no effort to return any of those kind words. Yes, I know, as I said, I am a horrible person. Hence why I made it my mission to make it up to them coming back here. Although one could say it was a half-assed mission, because I hadn't talked to these people in so long, I didn't know if they even wanted to hang out with me. I let my overthinking get to me and was too afraid to even reach out, because in my mind, it's been 7 years, surely they've moved on from me and found better friends that would actually respond to their messages, right? Wrong. And this is why seeing everyone's enthusiasm and making plans with me made my heart so full. Growing up, I always hated being alone. I didn't know how to justify this fear. Was it that I was afraid of my thoughts getting too loud in my head, or did I simply get bored too easily? When I lived in Hong Kong, I was rarely alone. I always travelled around with a nanny or a helper and wasn't old enough to be frequently going out with friends. But there is something about the freedom of doing what you want and when you want when you're alone that is so calming, that even amongst the noise and the rush of the Hong Kong city that I can feel the small spark of joy. For a while after moving to Melbourne, I associated Hong Kong as being the fast-paced city that stressed me out. But coming back this time made me realize this was just the culture of Hong Kong, the culture that I had been so distanced from that made me into a foreigner to my home country. I had realized that the loud talking, street spitting, aggressive shoving and speed walking was everything that made Hong Kong home to me. And as gross or bad as that sounds, welcome to Hong Kong, I guess. But really, all it took for me to come to this realization was the taxi ride from the airport that smelled of beat-up leather seats and cigarettes the driver had been smoking, who was driving 50 k's over the limit. And you might be wondering, what does all this waffling about Hong Kong culture have to do with you being able to be alone? Well, it's because of all these factors that made it so comforting for me to walk along the streets having the most fun alone. Because it was only when I was by myself I could feel the presence of Hong Kong and appreciate the beauty of the place that I once upon a time called home. If I'm being honest, I probably have the worst memory anyone could have. Ask me what I ate last night and I will hesitate before giving you an uncertain answer. So logically, all my memories in these familiar places would cease to exist. However, when I sit in the same tatantang I sat in 10 years ago before my art lessons and walk through the shopping centre my brother and I once sped through on our Heelys, they all come back to me picture perfect clear. In a tourist perspective, going to these places may have been the most mundane travel itinerary anyone could have, but for me, it brought me so much happiness. Revisiting the same places I went to regularly as a kid, but having aged much more, gives you some sort of wholesome, exciting, yet comforting feeling. Like the rest of the world, COVID forced a lot of restaurants and shops to shut down, so I didn't know what to expect going back. And even without the pandemic as a factor, things like the quality of the food, technological advancements, the atmosphere made up by the customers could have changed. You would think that may mean they lack familiarity, but in fact, it was far from that. Watching how these places evolved kind of made me self-reflect and realize that I too have grown over these past few years. 10 years ago, walking in the same stores, I'd be asking my parents to buy the entire toy section without thinking twice about the price. And now, I'm in the cosmetic aisle comparing prices of an already cheap item with another store to make sure I'm getting the best deal. But as weird as it sounds, I kind of felt proud and glad knowing that these businesses that made up my childhood were still around, and at times also funny visiting them with a semi-adult perspective. Because it's only then when you realize that some of the things you found so spectacular as a kid were in fact not that spectacular. Yet knowing something so simple and insignificant brought you so much joy makes you want to relive that fairy tale. But at the end of the day, change will always be inevitable, and all that really matters is the memories that you hold on to. Day 5 was precisely when I started breaking down. If you know Asian culture, you know how controversial their opinions on body image and weight is, especially to girls. Something that I was never that big of a fan of Hong Kong was how openly they talked about, and more importantly, scrutinized weight. because I was taller than most girls and guys of that fact. It meant I weighed a little more, and somehow the math just did not math in all these aunties' minds, telling me that I should be dieting at the ripe age of 10 or even less. Although I know these aunties have so much love towards me, I just could never grasp the idea of why it was a necessary thing to be telling me. And because I grew up around people telling me this, my eating habits have been fucked for a really, really long time. Going back to Hong Kong, of course the first thing on my mind was all the food I was going to eat. But in the back of my mind, I also feared what was to come. I feared that the same comments or even worse would be made because I knew I gained weight. But no shit I did. It's been 7 years. I'm not going to have the same body I had when I was 12 years old. As sad as it is, I had to mentally prepare myself for what's to come, to somehow prevent myself from spiraling into the same black hole that took me so long to get out of. And as it turns out, I had every reason to worry, because these aunties managed to comment about my weight before the food even got to the table. They had basically implied that I would never make it in the music industry unless I lost weight. For those who don't know, I'm an aspiring singer-songwriter, so for them to not even recognize my art because my weight is overshadowed by it really hurt me. Now ideally I would have easily bounced back from this, and it wouldn't have affected me because I thought I had learnt that I was much more than what my weight was. But at the end of the day, I'm still human, a very broken one in fact. And yeah, these vlogs may be filled with the amazing food adventures I went on, but that just goes to show you never know what is going on in someone else's life, and it is not and will never be your place to comment on their weight, because words can do serious damage. My earliest memories of Ocean Park were all with my primary school friends. As soon as I grew up and learned to appreciate the thrill of those big rides that used to terrify me, I was a frequent flyer, alright. It always went like this: waiting in hours of lines, talking shit in said lines, being the loudest group of idiots there, and taking stupid photos with the weirdest poses. And although I no longer talk to any of these people, looking at the photos make me laugh. But this time, I was here with a different friend, one that I hold quite an interesting connection to. This is Viv. On paper, we've known each other from my Hong Kong schooling days, but only on her end. See, her boyfriend and I have been friends since prep, like fetus days. Both of them had plans on studying in Melbourne, and she knew absolutely no one in her course, which I happened to be also studying. So being the great boyfriend he is, you're welcome Justin, he wanted me to meet her so she had a fellow design friend. When I met her, she tells me we were in the same grade and she knows who I am. See, I thought she came when I left because I didn't know she existed. And to make matters worse, there was only 80-ish people in our grade. How embarrassing. Anyways, I was under the impression that this would be my first and last time seeing her. Fast forward to the start of uni, turns out she's in my class too. We end up getting really close with 3 other people and have weekly lunches all together. And guess what happens a few months later? I start making music with Justin, her boyfriend, my friend, and she's always there with us. I am the resident third wheeler after all, so I basically hang out with her 3 times a week. Meanwhile, I see my other friends once every 3 months maybe? But just looking back and thinking the last year I didn't even recognize this girl and now we're this close just goes to show that sometimes it's the most unexpected people that come into your life that becomes the closest of friends. Anyways, these are the 3 other idiots that I got close with on this trip, but that's for another video. So for now, enjoy this passionate performance of Sweet Caroline by them.
Hey Caroline, ba ba ba, good night, that must seem so good. So good, so good, so good. I've been inclined, ba ba ba, to believe they never would. No.